Welcome to the High Note Podcast. I am Ted Zimnicki, owner of High Note Performance and founder of HNPacademy.com, where we take the tools perfected by sports science to stage athletes, to turn singers into the kind of athletes that performers want to or that companies want to hire again and again and again. I'm forgetting my own catchphrases. Sorry, guys. But I am so happy, so thrilled that the one and only Dr. Keith Colclough has taken some time out of his busy schedule to hang out with us. Dr. Keith, thank you and welcome to the High Note Podcast.
Thanks, Ted. Very happy to be here.
And it is a pleasure to have you. I always want to start off with, for anyone who hasn't heard of you before, which hopefully is very few people, but anyways, Keith, what do you do?
Yeah, so I am a very recently tenured professor of voice and the director of opera at Pepperdine University. So I teach voice lessons there, lyric diction, and then run our opera program. In addition to that, I'm also an active bass baritone. So when my academic schedule happens to align with a gig that comes around, I also still perform. But that doesn't happen as frequently as I would like because Pepperdine keeps me pretty darn busy.
I can only imagine. And Pepperdine, of course, is in Malibu, California, in the LA area?
Correct.
Okay. Fantastic. And you said recently tenured. How long have you been there?
Well, I've been teaching here. This is my 10th year. I started as an adjunct and then moved into a visiting full-time role. And then I guess 6 years ago, started a tenure track position and just got the word on Saturday, that I have tenure now. So I'm very happy to have that behind me. And
congratulations!
Thank you.
That is a big deal these days.
Yeah, I definitely feel a little bit lighter walking around now.
So now you can really cut loose and let your dark side show. Hopefully there's not.
You can say that,
yeah. Of course. So how did you find yourself teaching at Pepperdine? Kind of walk us through that from, even start as early as high school, if you'd like.
Yeah. So both my brother and I are singers. And it's funny, people always assume that we're from a musical family. We're not really, but our parents were really enthusiastic about the arts. So we both started singing in church as little kids, and then took string lessons. He played the cello, I played the viola. In high school, we got into a lot of musical theater and choir, and then both of us at some point realized, ooh, our voices fit a lot better in opera than they do in musical theater. From there, things kind of diverged a little more. He went fully down the performing path, and sings leading roles all over the world. LA Opera, Chicago Lyric. He's made his Met debut a couple years ago as Macbeth, jumping in for somebody.
Wow.
Whereas I, partially through watching Craig, my brother, who's a couple years older, watching him in that sort of opera purgatory in your mid-20s, early 30s, where you don't really fit into school, but people won't really hire you at a livable wage. Watching him do that, and then starting to myself teach in grad school, realized, ooh, this is really where I feel like myself, is when I'm teaching. Our dad coached my brothers and I in soccer and little league and soccer, and we always, those are some of my fondest memories of my childhood. And there was always sort of this culture of coaching and teaching and building community. And I think that really aligned with music for me once I started teaching. I went to Pepperdine actually for my undergrad.
Cool.
Yeah. So I became friends with Devin Guthrie, who's an American soprano. We grew up in the same hometown. And I met her at a singing competition, and she was applying to Pepperdine because her teacher taught there. And I thought, well, if it's good enough for Devin, I might as well apply there as well. One thing led to another. I ended up, getting my bachelor's at Pepperdine. Then I did a Fulbright to Germany, studying voice there with a pretty prominent teacher, and then bounced around a couple different grad schools, started teaching as a TA in grad school, and really that sort of solidified it for me. And then one of my dear mentors, my voice teacher from Pepperdine and my predecessor in the role I'm in now, he went on sabbatical just about a decade ago, And so they brought me in to fill in with some of his duties while he was away, and they never got rid of me. So so a decade later, here I am, and it's pretty fun. We just moved on to on-campus housing about a year and a half ago, and there's this really prominent rock feature up in the hillside above campus. I have a very vivid memory of being up there with my roommate going, wouldn't that be cool to teach at Pepperdine and live in those houses? And yeah, it's pretty crazy. That's come to fruition. It's weird to have a dream and then see it become a reality like this one has. So.
Yeah. However many years later, you got to realize that dream. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So there's so much in there that I think is so interesting. I would love to ask some questions about the Fulbright.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I don't think we've talked about at all on the podcast.
Yeah.
So what's a Fulbright?
Yeah. I was in the same place as an undergrad. I'm a first generation college graduate. My parents weren't academics. They built a beautiful life, my brothers and I, but that was sort of a new path. And I remember, I think it was the summer of 2007. I participated in Songfest. It used to actually be hosted at Pepperdine at our Malibu campus.
Oh, cool.
It's since bounced, all over the country. And now it's in my hometown, Claremont, this year, which is ironic. But yeah, so I participated in Songfest and sang for Graham Johnson a couple times. And I still remember singing "Am Bach im Frühling" with Graham. He just let me play it. He just sat down and played, and there was, when you work with a great collaborative pianist, it transforms your singing. And I've been privileged to work with a lot of really good pianists. Those like 45 seconds of singing with him playing, that stands out as a sort of transcendent experience. I saw you talking about the flow state, I think you were saying in a recent video, and I was like, yeah, I can relate to that. But anyway, I digress. So I worked with Graham Johnson at Songfest, and he said, if you could find a way to come study at the Guildhall, you could work with Rudolf Pierney, who taught Bryn Terfel, who was, of course, one of my idols, as a young singer. And I thought, wow, that's super cool. How do I do that? And one of my friends recommended a Fulbright. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to leverage that into going to the UK. Fulbrights in the UK are extremely competitive, whereas Germany, the acceptance rates are a little bit higher. So what is a Fulbright? Sorry, I've buried the lead. Fulbright is a scholar. It's an academic exchange program, essentially, that was started following World War II. And the idea is that if we're studying and learning and having this exchange of ideas, that it'll help build international community. And that hopefully will both enrich lives, but also prevent the next World War, which
fingers crossed,
sadly remains very pertinent.
That's true.
So it started actually with Germany, and it remains the most vibrant with that country. I think they give out 90 Fulbright scholarships to go actually study per year, and it really is just they pay for your entire year. You go in different countries have different setups, but in Germany they have a language course you can do, which I definitely took advantage of, and then you basically go and you either have a research project, or if you're in the arts, you just pursue your craft. So I was able to go and study with Pierney in Mannheim, Germany. I was very interested in doing that because we also have a study abroad program in Heidelberg, which is right down the street from Mannheim.
Yeah.
So got to visit some old stomping grounds and work with a really prominent world-class teacher. And it was, it is a challenging year, but also a really, really rewarding year. And highly recommend it for anyone who's either looking for that next step after their undergraduate work, or they even have some Fulbrights for doctoral students. Even college professors can apply for them. There's a wide range of offerings they provide. It's a really great program, and I hope its funding is never threatened, because it's a really valuable thing that our government does.
That's awesome. I mean, Fulbright was not something that was even spoken at all about where I finished my
Yeah.
undergrad. So it seems like it's something that not as many people know about as maybe they should, because it
Yeah.
sounds like an awesome program.
Yeah, and you tell people, oh, I did a Fulbright, and they usually say, okay, what were you researching? And the great thing is that depending on the field you're in, they have a panel of specialists in your field.
Mm.
And they recognize that if you're going and you're studying and you're doing your craft as an artist, whether you're a visual artist, a composer, a singer, that is your scholarship. You're not going to go if you're going to go research, I don't know, Bach. You'd probably actually apply under history rather than
Oh,
music. Uh, Maybe don't quote me on that, even though I'm saying this in a public forum. But really, they let you do your craft, and
yeah.
that's really cool.
I hope that no one takes anything they hear on this podcast as true gospel. Like
Yes.
do some research. Every situation is different. Every institution is different. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, cool. No, that's and you said you did it right after your undergrad, so it's appropriate for people just finishing their undergrad. You said there's also programs for masters and doctoral level as well.
Correct. Yeah, and the application is due pretty early in the year, especially if you apply through an institution. So I'm actually on the committee at Pepperdine that helps students write their proposals and polish them. So we start that process, I think, in as early as August. In fact, we just had a workshop for students to start thinking about that. And then I'm not sure when the application date is, but it's earlier than most of those graduate applications are
Hmm.
due. Uh, so yeah, it's one of those things that you want to work on pretty early. There are academic requirements. If you don't have a certain GPA, it might not be worth your time to apply. But if you're somebody who really excels at academics and is good at their craft, it's a really cool option to go have a free year of study and learn a lot about yourself, about your craft, meet some cool people.
That's very cool, especially in opera and going to Germany because there's so much opera in Germany compared to the
Yeah.
States. It's incredible.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Yeah.
ended up. My wife is actually half German, and not a good pickup line. But very soon in our one of our first conversations, I said, "Oh, I once dated someone just because their German was good," and she still holds that over me. But she still stuck
Okay.
around, and we got married. So
Well, somehow you dug your way out of that hole and
yes,
and
yes,
found yourself in a marriage. Uh,
yeah.
so now that you are in a teaching position and I imagine have some purview over all sorts of what different students might do in their next step, uh, can you sort of compare and contrast the type of student who should maybe go the more traditional grad school route versus going and looking at a Fulbright option?
Mm, that's a really good question. I'd say, kind of as you already alluded to, if you're interested in working in Europe. I think it's a great way to try that out and go, oh, this is what it means to live abroad. I'll say for me, the first 6 months that I wasn't doing, we had a language course where it was a whole bunch of other Fulbright students, and so there's immediate community there.
Hmm.
But then those next 6 months, when it was just me at the Musikhochschule in Mannheim, were really challenging. Germans are notorious for taking a long time to open up, and it ended up being a lot of the international students um, who I became friends with. A lot of folks from Serbia, Korea, Macedonia. It was a really cool mix of folks Uzbekistan. Really, a really cool mix of folks that I got to know there. Um, but yeah, it was the first 6 months were really challenging, and then the last 3 months ended up being pretty magical, and I was really sad to leave and feel like I like left a pot on the stove, like
Hmm.
boiling on the stove, that there was another life that I built, and it's just kind of sitting there neglected. But yeah, so I think if you're interested in working in Europe, it's a really good option. And then as I said earlier, if you are academically inclined, if you have a good GPA, if you can write a good application and cover letter, I think writing is an undervalued skill in all walks of life. But as artists, if you can write well, that's gonna set you apart in anything you do, I think. Um,
I've
but yeah,
experienced that with grant applications for sure.
exactly, exactly.
And
Yeah,
it almost sounds like Fulbright is not exactly, but a type of grant as well.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's generally referred to as a Fulbright grant. Yeah,
Oh, is it?
exactly.
Okay.
Uh, Yeah, there's a bit of infrastructure around it, but really, like for Germany, they have one office that I think when I did it, there were like two people working there, maybe an intern, and they're
Mhm.
overseeing over 100 people who are working or studying in Germany and over 100 people working and studying in the US. So they don't have time to supervise you unless you have an emergency. They're there for you if you need them, but really they want you to just go do your thing.
Sure.
Oh, I should also mention there's another option for Fulbright, which is an English language teaching Fulbright, where
Okay.
you basically go and you teach English for a year. Um, I'll admit, we should I say this publicly? Yeah, we had a conference where all of the Fulbrighters in Western Europe came together, and the scholarly Fulbrights, we might have called the English teaching ones half brights,
Oh.
but I don't endorse that statement. Very bright people, and it's still a very prestigious thing to receive. Um, but yeah, English, I can say this, English language teaching Fulbrights are also another really good option if you just want to go abroad for a year, and if you're interested in teaching, it's a great way to get experience doing that.
Okay. I mean, of course, that looks fantastic when you bring that back and you're applying to other places that you went and got this
Yeah,
Fulbright grant and you'd follow through with it. That's awesome. That's very cool.
yeah.
And so now you're at Pepperdine. I think it's
Hmm.
the Seaver College nestled within the
Correct.
Pepperdine University. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And if I researched correctly, Pepperdine is strictly undergrad, right?
Well, Seaver colleges.
Seaver College. Okay.
There might even be one or two very, very small graduate programs associated with Seaver College. But yeah, Seaver and the music department in particular is all
Mhm.
undergrad. So we do a fully staged opera every year and then opera scenes every other summer in Heidelberg as part of that study abroad program. Um, and so we do operas with an all undergraduate cast. Every once in a while, we might hire a professional if there's a really vocally demanding role. Or what we did a few years ago, we did Le Nozze di Figaro,
Mhm.
and we hired my brother to be the assistant director and also sing Bartolo in that,
Okay.
which was super cool. So he came in and was working with our singers, was in the show. They got to work with a high level professional and see their stagecraft. And then it was something like 5 months later, we got to go to LA Opera and see him sing the title role
Wow.
in the opera at LA Opera. So that was a super cool experience for the students, I think, to go, okay, this person we know, they're the lead in this. This is a real thing. There's a connection because I think as a student, we kind of hold up these A houses and they feel very distant. And I
Mhm.
think there's value in feeling how that's attainable and that it is the same craft. The technology backstage might be a little more expensive and a little fancier, but it's the same thing. You're still in a green room, you're still walking on stage with lights in your face, and it's just at the highest level you can reach. That's the only difference.
Yeah. So you mentioned something in there that I hadn't seen anything about. Tell me about the
Mhm.
study abroad program that you mentioned for a second.
Yeah, so
The scenes
Pepperdine has a
program
lot
and
of
all that.
yeah, Pepperdine has a
Yeah.
lot of campuses abroad. Once again, the oldest one is in Germany. It started shortly after World War II. They own a house there that's right by the castle in Heidelberg. It's ridiculously
Mm.
nice. And so every other summer we take a group of music students over there. This is probably the case that a lot of universities, our students are on, most of them are on performance merit-based scholarships, and we need them to be on campus to perform in the fall and
Sure.
the spring. So to give them an opportunity to study abroad and continue their musical instruction, every other summer we take a group, usually about 30 students, to Germany, and we do opera scenes, we do chamber music. Sometimes we'll do an excursion all the way to Austria to the Alps. There, we have some
Oh, that's
relationships
awesome.
with some choirs there, but it's a really neat time. Also for them to try out what would it be like. Although I have to say, when you're living in a house with 30 other Americans, it's pretty different than living and working in Europe. But what would it be
I bet
like
it is. Yeah.
yeah, to go study and or work in Europe. And yeah, it's a really transformative time for the students.
Okay. No, that sounds awesome. I hadn't heard about that from Pepperdine before, so I'm glad we got to talk about that. So for someone coming out of high school who's looking at applying for a music performance degree, let's since we're both singers, let's go ahead and say vocal performance degree. Uh,
Yeah.
what do you think are some of the advantages of an exclusively undergraduate school versus a larger school that has graduate, doctoral, AD degrees as well?
Yeah, I think they're substantial. One, you're guaranteed that you're going to work with a professor. At some universities, and this is a great experience for those students. And sometimes, sorry, I'm speaking sort of out of order. At some larger universities, you might study with a doctoral student or a master's student, especially if you're a music minor or something like that. Um, and those folks can have a lot to offer. But I'll definitely say, as someone who did that, over a decade ago, and now has been has fought and learned a lot. Well, fight isn't maybe the right word. Let me back up. Who's wrestled with teaching for a long time and learned a lot of lessons along the way myself as a teacher. I am much better at my craft than I was when I was a graduate student. So working with actual faculty. The other big thing is, I think, performance opportunities. If you're at a university that has a lot of performance opportunities and it's all undergraduate, then you're not competing with master students, doctoral students. Um, so it's pretty unusual, I think, that our top students will graduate with sometimes two, sometimes even three operatic roles on their resume already at 21, 22. Um, so I think that's a real benefit. I do think that also there are some drawbacks. Having models, folks who are just a few years older than you and are just a little bit more developed than you, that can be really valuable, learning from masters or doctoral students. But definitely that on stage performance experience, that is invaluable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Uh, so the music program, the opera program at Pepperdine, how many students are involved? You can just a rough head count.
We have anywhere from 4 to 12 voice majors per year, so usually about 20 to 35 majors at a time within the department. We also have a young but thriving musical theater degree,
Oh,
where
awesome.
I've really made an effort to build strong relationships with that musical theater degree. And Kelly Todd, who's our choreographer and really oversees that degree, she's been an awesome collaborator. So we just did The Merry Widow, and about a third of our cast were musical theater majors.
Mm.
So we're doing a lot of light opera, operetta to sort of bridge that gap. Also, I think that for a young singer, whether they want to go into opera or musical theater, doing those early operetta, light opera works, you learn so much. You learn so much about your craft doing
Oh yeah.
Gilbert and Sullivan. Um, so yeah, so that's about how many students we have. Our instrumental program is a little bit smaller. We have a lot of music minors or just
Mm.
scholarship students who participate. But the vocal program at Pepperdine is really strong. We also have an awesome classical guitar program. Christopher
Oh,
Parkening runs
cool.
that. So it is one of the best undergraduate guitar programs in the country. Um, so they in many ways set the bar for us, where we go, okay, that's the level we all have to get to, is where these amazing young guitarists are.
Okay. Yeah, you were mentioning the rep choices, when you're working with voices that young, and I imagine that is can pose a difficulty. But I love that you landed on GNS. Like Gilbert and Sullivan is awesome. I think I saw you did a Pinafore recently, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
awesome.
Uh,
That's such a great operetta.
yeah, the first time I listened to that, I didn't ever I've never performed in a GNS
Oh.
piece, which I just can't believe, because I am basically British. I love British humor, and there are all these bass rolls, and it's like
Yeah.
they're actually rolls I could sing in GNS. Like, how did I never do one of these? But I remember I listened to that a recording of that, probably from the.
So the music program, the opera program at Pepperdine, how many students are involved? You can just a rough head count.
We have anywhere from 4 to 12 voice majors per year, so usually about 20 to 35 majors at a time within the department. We also have a young but thriving musical theater degree,
Oh,
where
awesome.
I've really made an effort to build strong relationships with that musical theater degree. And Kelly Todd, who's our choreographer and really oversees that degree, she's been an awesome collaborator. So we just did The Merry Widow, and about a third of our cast were musical theater majors.
Mm,
So we're doing a lot of light opera, operetta to sort of bridge that gap. Also, I think that for a young singer, whether they want to go into opera or musical theater, doing those early operetta, light opera works, you learn so much. You learn so much about your craft doing
oh yeah.
Gilbert and Sullivan. Um, so yeah, so that's about how many students we have. Our instrumental program is a little bit smaller. We have a lot of music minors or just
Mm,
scholarship students who participate. But the vocal program at Pepperdine is really strong. We also have an awesome classical guitar program. Christopher
oh
Parkening runs
cool.
that. So it is one of the best undergraduate guitar programs in the country. Um, so they in many ways set the bar for us where we go, okay, that's the level we all have to get to is where these amazing young guitarists are.
Okay. Yeah, you were mentioning the rep choices when you're working with voices that young, and I imagine that is can pose a difficulty. But I love that you landed on GNS. Like Gilbert and Sullivan is awesome. I think I saw you did a Pinafore recently, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
awesome.
Uh,
That's such a great operetta.
Yeah, the first time I listened to that, I didn't ever I've never performed in a GNS
Oh.
piece, which I just can't believe because I am basically British. I love British humor, and there are all these bass rolls, and it's like
Yeah.
they're actually rolls I could sing in GNS. Like, how did I never do one of these? But I remember I listened to that a recording of that, probably from the Doily Cart company, and just fell in love with that piece
Yeah.
immediately. I think it was like the next year, at a very strange occurrence, we had more male voice majors than female, which never happens in just about
Yeah.
any program.
Right
And
to
I
the
went,
Guinness Book for that one. That's a world record. That's
exactly. I think COVID did some unfortunate things to our enrollment numbers.
sure.
Um,
I've been hearing that a
but
lot.
yeah, yeah. I thought, well, maybe I guess this is the year. We've got a bunch of guys, and this show is really male heavy and not as many female roles. So we got to do HMS Pinafore,
That's awesome. That's so cool. Uh,
Doily Cart company, and just fell in love with that piece
yeah.
immediately. I think it was like the next year, at a very strange occurrence, we had more male voice majors than female, which never happens in just
Yeah.
about any program.
Right
And
to
I
the
went,
Guinness Book for that one. That's a world record. That's
exactly. I think COVID did some unfortunate things to our enrollment numbers.
sure.
Um,
I've been hearing that a
but
lot.
yeah, yeah. I thought, well, maybe I guess this is the year. We've got a bunch of guys, and this show is really male heavy and not as many female roles. So we got to do HMS Pinafore.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Uh, so speaking a little more philosophically here, because we've been diving into logistics, and I think that's important. But in the grand scheme, what really draws you as a performer and as a teacher to classical music and opera?
That's a good question. In some ways, it's kind of like acrobatics, where you're like, "Holy cow, a human can do that." I remember my first voice teacher was a I don't know if he was a lyric spinto or anyway he was the first operatic voice I
Oh, if we're going
heard.
to talk about the Fox system, this is going to go a very different way. But
Yeah, it was the first real classical voice I'd heard in person, and I remember him singing like a high B flat in our lesson and just going, "Whoa, that is amazing!" So that's a big part of it. It's just the sheer spectacle of it, and the fact that a human can do that, I think is super cool. I also think that there's something really transcendent about music, and I'm not going to. I'll be honest. There's a lot of opera that I don't particularly enjoy.
fair.
And I think that's like any genre. If you're looking at film, if you're looking at musical theater, if you're talking about rap, it can, or country music. There are artists and there are composers that I find just speak to my soul. And then there are pieces that I go, that one's not for me. And I think we tend to, especially I think maybe folks who aren't opera people, they
Mhm.
tend to hold up the genre as sort of a monolith. That like, if I listened to the Incoronation of Poppaea and I didn't like it, then I don't like opera. Or I heard this, oh, I hope this isn't rude, but I heard this 65-year-old soprano who sang opera professionally when they were like 30, and they're singing a, I don't know, a Christmas carol at my church.
Mm.
Um, and it's maybe not the best choice for their voice at this point. Um, and they go, I don't like opera. I think that's really sad. So I think that opera is as diverse, if not more diverse, than just about any genre of music or within the performing arts. Um, and so there are amazing stories in opera, and there's some really like weird and not so great stories in opera. And there's amazing music, and then there's music where I go, I don't know about that. But I think that combination of all those different elements between the scenic design, the lighting, the music, people embodying characters, and then that sort of yeah, that transcendent coming together of music and story and spectacle just creates some amazing moments. Um, it's very expensive sometimes, and that is challenging in today's world. But I think people are finding ways to do things that are really moving and compelling that don't have those same overheads. And I'm excited to see how the genre continues to evolve. Um, yeah, I'm pessimistic and very optimistic at the same time about how our craft will develop.
Yeah. Well, I would love to sort of push that a little bit farther since you are in a position where you can, to some degree, shape the future of opera through your students. So what are some of the things that you're passionate about to help make that happen?
Great question. I think I think for young students, giving them permission to redefine success that I definitely felt when I was an undergrad. Well, I've got to go sing at the Metropolitan Opera. I mean, it's such a stereotypical line, but it's true. That's kind of what I think maybe our generation was fed, is that
Mhm.
that's success. If you sing at the top houses, then you've succeeded. And if you're singing title roles, not singing in the chorus, you have to sing big roles, the biggest roles for your voice type, and you have to sing them at the biggest houses. And for a few people that happens, and that's great, and they tend to be amazing singers. But in terms of having a fulfilling life and having a fulfilling artistic life, I think casting a broader net or setting, just expanding your view is really important. Um, like I said, opera at that level is super expensive, and those opportunities don't look to be expanding, they look to continue to contract. Um, and so I think being a master of your craft and being a versatile master of your craft,
Mm.
one thing I emphasize with my students is that there's not a right and a wrong way to sing, which is gonna contradict potentially with some things I might say later in this interview. But there are more efficient and healthy ways, and then there are ways that maybe cost a little bit more. And then there are
Mm.
expectations associated with whatever genre you're singing. So if you sing uh, Waitress, the musical Waitress, like you would sing Rossini, that's maybe the wrong way to sing that.
You're
But
gonna
it
have a
doesn't,
bad time. Like it's not,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But it doesn't mean necessarily that's the wrong way to sing. It just means that it's one of your options. And I think that similar to redefining success in your career, when you redefine what does it mean to sing well, what is right, then it becomes a matter of choice. And then you are empowered. You get to choose, ooh, I learned how to do this cool thing with my voice. It fits in this piece or in this moment. I'm going to use
Mhm.
it. And then you're making artistic choice. You're expressing yourself, not trying to fit what someone else has said. This is what you have to do. You have to sing at the Met, and you have to sing exactly like this. It's like, maybe you have more agency than that.
Maybe we can bend the genre just a little bit, uh,
Yeah.
just slightly. Yeah.
Yeah, we just did The Merry Widow about a week ago, And the hall that we get to do our shows in, it's a beautiful hall, Smothers Theater, but it is designed to be acoustically dead. And
Mm,
so for years we would kind of like hide microphones on the floor and in the ceiling to try to just make it sound like it was unamplified, but allow our singers to be heard. And this year, finally, I just said, nope, we're just using individual mics so that we can actually hear the piece. Also, we're dealing with like 19, 20-year-old voices singing opera.
right.
Maybe that also is not a bad thing. Um, and most people said, this is awesome. We can hear it so well. One or two people said, why were they mic'd? Why were they mic'd? And I was like, well, we
Well,
could hold on to what we define as important, or we could let the genre evolve and allow the audience to engage with it in a way where they might say, "Hey, I like opera."
yeah.
So yeah, bending the I don't yes, yes,
It seems like the more people that I speak to, and I feel so lucky that I get to do these interviews and speak to so many different points of view, the more it seems like there are a few like golden calves that are sacred and we certainly can't touch
yes,
them ever, right?
yes,
And that those calves are slowly but surely being, ushered on to their great reward, and I think that's only a good thing.
yeah,
Especially because we've all heard a million times, opera's dying, opera's dying. Well, and I think you said it perfectly, that the opportunities to sing at, there's not, the Met is only going to do Falstaff, and they only need one Falstaff so many performances per year or something like that. So
yep,
that as those opportunities dwindle, we have to kill the golden calf and create new opportunities and reinvent the genre so that it doesn't die out.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, LA Opera, I think, is always going to be there, right? I mean, fingers crossed. But from what I understand, I think they recently removed one production from their season. Is that right? Or they had planned for 8 usually, and then they went to 7, or I might be
Could be.
getting the specifics wrong.
Yeah, they've started doing a lot of diverse projects. They're doing more individual like recitals where they'll bring in Audra McDonald or someone like that, or they're doing sort of I don't is that off brand? Yeah, they're doing smaller productions and new works, and I think they're responding pretty dynamically. But I think you're probably right that they've cut back the number of just main stage productions that they're
Yeah.
doing.
Again, for anyone listening, don't take what we
Yeah.
say as gospel. Do your own research. Do a quick Google. You'll find out better than me trying to pull information out of the ether.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I love that you mentioned redefining success and changing what ideal really looks like, because perfect doesn't exist and there's no right way to do it. I talk about that with breathing very regularly. There's not a
Yes.
correct way to breathe. There's just
It's a
different ways
bag
to
of
breathe.
air.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I love what we're getting passionate about it. It's great.
Yes.
Right, like there's no right way to hit a golf ball either. Like sometimes you need it to
Yeah.
go low and flat, sometimes you need it to curve. Like it's tools. Just put as many tools in your toolbox as possible. But
Hmm.
when a student leaves Pepperdine, or leaves the music program there, what are some of the things that you hope they are walking away with?
Mm. Uh, Self-motivation and independence and the ability to find information. Um, I think I think our job as voice teachers is to teach our students to teach themselves and to teach them
Mm,
how to practice. Um, there are some voice teachers, and I get this. It's kind of their business model. They need folks to come back to them. They need
sure.
to have people showing up for lessons because that's their income. And maybe I'm blessed in that my role. I mean, we need to recruit students, but I'm going to have a certain number of students regardless whether they're majors or non-majors. But
Well, and,
um,
and also by definition, your students have to leave at some point,
yes, yes,
right?
that's a great
Like
point.
the
Yeah,
this isn't the right word either, but your studio has to be some level of transient. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's a great point. Um, so yeah, I really try to empower my students and put them in the driver's seat of their learning. Um, I think it was, I, I was thinking about this earlier today. I think maybe it was Anamorpho in Great Singers on Great Singing, the Jerome Hines book. I think
It's a
she was
great
talking about
book.
how she'd have like a voice lesson every day for this amount of time, and that was kind of like the old thing. You'd go and you'd work with your teacher multiple times a week, and that's not realistic in today's world. Lessons are expensive. Everybody's really busy. If you're in an academic setting, your teacher has a lot of students. Um, and so I've added in to my teaching curriculum a practice journal that my students
Mm.
do usually online, and then also a different curricula of sort of reading and reflective questions and such. So the first semester we really focus on I call it picking up the instrument. So what is your body? How does your instrument work? Probably a lot of the stuff that you're really focused on and work with. So I'm gonna have to snoop around your website
But
and see.
yeah, by all means, I'm sure we can continue this conversation for hours. It seems like, but
Um, so we have these readings, both so that they realize, okay, there's a whole world of information out there, and that they might go, okay, there's this book, The Vocal Athlete. Maybe that's a book that I should go check out from the library. Or there's, that there are all these different resources they can draw on. And then with that practice journal, I had no idea what I was doing when I practiced as an undergrad. I didn't know anything about how we learn. I didn't know anything about motor learning, and I think the more intentional we can train our students to be from day one about how they're using their time, what they're doing in the practice room. 5 minutes intentionally applied can be so much more productive than an hour if you're just banging your head against the wall. So my students upload their practice journal before their lesson each week, and it allows me to see what they've been working on, what they've been struggling with, how they've been succeeding, how they're spending their time. And then it allows me to show up and yes, we say, hey, how are you doing? How's your week been? And we have that exchange of humanness, which is a
sure.
lovely part of a lesson, but sometimes becomes the bulk of a lesson. And then I've already built an agenda for the day. I know what exercises usually we're going to do. I know how much time they want to devote to repertoire. And the thing that I insist on from them each week is they make an agenda or their objectives for the lesson,
Mm.
so that they realize that they're ultimately the ones determining how this goes. Um, so yeah, that's the thing I would say is that I hope my students feel empowered and feel like they can train themselves. One of the most exciting things that's happened for me in the last couple of years is two specific students, one sort of baritone and then one bass baritone, both musical theater majors, but they graduated and then COVID hit, and they actually graduated right as COVID was, we were in quarantine. Um,
Mm.
but but one of them came to have a lesson with me about 2 years later, and then the other one, I heard a clip on social media. They were singing Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, and they both improved a huge amount, drastically. And I said, "Oh my goodness, who have you been working with? This is great." And they said, I've been doing what we worked on, and I had a lot of time, and I worked diligently on it, and I just kept thinking about what we've been doing, and I kept getting better. And I think that patience and that diligent application is really important. You can't rush it. Just like
Yeah.
you go and you do bicep curls once at the gym, you're not going to get much stronger. But if you keep doing that, if you apply yourself diligently, yeah, you'll see results.
I think patience is a skill that not enough people talk about in the music business.
Yes.
And I think that a lot has, we can chalk a lot up to social media on that, right? Like it's
Yeah.
so easy to post something on TikTok and suddenly you get a million hits and all that. And that's great. It happens for some people. Uh,
Yeah.
but patience, man, the importance of that can't be overstated.
Yeah.
And then knowing what to do with your time. So it's student led learning. They get to fuel their own discoveries to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, that's how long have you been doing that practice journal like that?
Yeah. It's funny. I had my pre-tenure review about 3 years ago, and they said, "Oh, we encourage you to put more structure into your lessons." And I went, "Oh, they don't know our craft. This is a bunch of biologists and
Yeah,
linguists, and they don't know what they're talking about." And then I went, "Oh, wait a minute, they're onto something there." So we use Google Suite a lot, so it tends to be
Mhm.
Google Documents. And I have to say that, so I've been building those different sort of modules semester by semester, so I'm not overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Um, I have one on motor learning, or basically how we learn motor learning, one on vocal acoustics, one on, fundamentals of acting, essentially. How do you prepare a song?
Yeah.
Um, and currently the one I'm building is like, how do you write a cover letter? How do you write a resume? How do you do your taxes? What's the benefit of being hired as a contractor versus the benefit of being hired as an employee in terms of
Wait,
your
you're
taxes?
talking to singers about taxes? Oh my, like
Isn't that
amazing.
weird?
That's
I know.
crazy.
And 20 year
What are you
olds
what are
too.
you doing over there, Keith? Taxes?
Yeah. Terrifying, huh?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh man, like looking back, if so I wish like oh, I wish, but
yep. Yeah, we just had dinner with my brother-in-law and his wife 2 nights ago, and they were talking about their first year working as contractors for a sustainability company in the Pacific Northwest. And they're, I think I can divulge this. They were making like $30,000 a year because they were fresh out of school.
sure.
And then their tax bill came, and they were contractors, and they owed like $6,000. They went, what is this?
Yeah.
That's a fifth of your income that you haven't been
Yeah.
saving. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, I started doing that about 3 years ago, and I have to say, my colleagues commented on it too. I don't think they realized why, but a couple of my colleagues commented on that. Since then, my students have just started progressing at a notably faster rate. Um, and it's cool because they'll come in and they'll be like, yeah, my F1 H2 coupling wasn't quite. I'm like, who are you? What is this? This is creepy. But it's really fun. It's
Yeah.
really cool.
You're 19 years old and we're talking about this? Like, all right,
Yeah.
that's all like what an amazing just foundation to grow from. Uh
Yeah. Several of them, I'm like,
yeah.
you're gonna be a really good teacher one day. In addition to being fine singers.
Yeah, for sure. So similar lesson that I learned. I just learned it from seeing athletics because I've worked in high level
Yeah.
athletics and I've worked in high level opera, and there is no one who is more regimented with their training than professional traditional athletes, right? Like
Yeah.
everything is written down. Every gram that's consumed gets written down and tracked and logged, and like every like the weight on every rep and the swing velocity.
Exactly.
It's remarkable. Uh, and so I think we totally agree on that we've got similar missions in that way, right? Making it more regimented, but at
Absolutely.
the same time not removing the art. Like don't remove the soul, and looking at something doesn't mean that it's going to be structured. Like you can have
Yes.
soul and numbers at the same time. That's okay.
Yeah, like music theory. It's like
Oh,
music theory doesn't remove the art, but it gives you a new way of understanding it, a new way of creating art.
I have a music theory teacher who might disagree with you, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Or I should say, my initial music history experience would disagree with you, but that's a different
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
Uh, So let's talk for a second about auditions because I'm sure
Yeah.
you've been in more auditions than you can count at this point in your career. What are some of well let's start off with a fun question. Off the
Cool.
top of your head, what is one of the more ridiculous things you've seen in an audition? Don't name any names. We want to keep things anonymous on that side, but just a weird, crazy audition story that sticks in your mind.
Oh, this one's recent, so I'm not sure I want to talk about it.
Oh,
No, I think I can say this.
okay.
We had a student who was actually quite talented, but clearly had not either read the audition requirements
Hmm.
or I don't know, it was ill-advised. Anyway, they brought in a choral piece with actually very difficult accompaniment, and their music was, I think it might have even, their music was in terrible condition, but then they literally just sang, I think, the tenor part to this choral piece in an audition for a voice major. And we have pretty clear requirements listed on our website and that we email, and they sang it really nicely, but it was one of those moments of like we want to honor what this person is offering. I have to say that's one thing I love about my colleagues is they're really kind, generous people, and we all wanted to affirm this young person, but at the same time, it was like we're not getting much from this. So that was maybe I'd say
Okay.
read the brief. I had an embarrassing story where I auditioned for the Cradle Will Rock, and in an email referred to it as the Cradle Will Rock You. and and I think I was just this is when you're doing way too many auditions, and
Yeah.
they told me at the end of my audition they were very kind about it, but I didn't get that gig. Uh, but yeah, so I'd say just make sure your materials fit the brief and that you're reading things
It
in detail.
goes
Double
into
check.
goes into the communication skills we were talking about earlier, right?
Yes,
Like
exactly.
you spoke specifically about writing, but reading is equally valuable.
Yes.
Yeah. Reading comprehension can't be understated. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and then a little bit more in general, when someone comes into audition for you, and I imagine most of the people coming into audition for you are sort of that ending high school, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you love to see that would make you remember an audition, other than the right words, the right notes, the basics? But what really sets someone apart?
It's a great question. I mean, for Pepperdine specifically, we're not we're not Juilliard, we're not a big name school, um, but we have really great voice builders here. I think we're really good at taking people from A to maybe not to Z, because what undergraduate program can do that, but
Sure.
A to I don't know W. Um,
That's still pretty good. That's
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Um, and so I don't know. Everyone at that age tends to have something that's really good, and then a lot of things, or one or two things that are really areas for improvement. Um, I'd say generally, if I get really excited about an audition, it's healthy singing, it's in tune singing, and they're able to do a couple of those really weird maneuvers
Hmm.
that opera requires. What do I mean by that? I mean basically that they're able to pair the sound they produce with a resonance that makes that sound somewhere in their voice that is that otherworldly thing that opera is. And with understanding vocal acoustics, I tend to think about things very acoustically. I trained for a bit as a piano tuner and tuned pianos,
Hmm.
and so I think I hear differently than a lot of folks because of that. So like vocal acoustics for me, I go, yes, this brings things together. But if they're able to find those functions to get that chiaroscuro, get that singer's formant, get that ring somewhere in their voice, that for me is really exciting, because I go, okay, if they can communicate, they're singing in tune, it's healthy, and they can already find that sort of party trick weird thing that we do in some point of their voice, then I go, that's remarkable for a 19, 18, 19, 20-year old. I did kind of bury the lead there too, communicating that they have something to say, whether that's that they're a big character, or that there's a genuine quality where they sing from their heart, or they speak through the musical language. Um, some folks really that their phrasing says more than their text. And if you want to be an opera singer or an art song singer, that might not be so great. You might need to develop that. But if you want to be a choral singer, maybe that's more important, that you really understand how a piece works musically, that your musical language is beyond your vocabulary. What am I trying to say this? I think you understand what I mean. It
I think
transcends.
I think I do, but I would love to give you another shot at it.
Yeah, it transcends the language that they speak. They speak music more fluently than they do their, for instance, English. Um, yeah, how would you say that? I guess linguistics. Their musical vocabulary is bigger than their. I don't know. I'm getting beyond myself.
I ambushed you with this question. I'm sorry, Keith. That was not my intention. Uh, okay, I know we're kind of running up on time here, but I have had Just such a great time talking to you, Keith. Thank you again for taking some time out of your extremely busy schedule for some weirdo over here. But I'll leave the last word to you. Is there anything that you would like to impart to the audience who's listening, that you feel you might, any kind of value you might want to add to them, or what they can add to opera classical music?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, I'd say thank you for chatting with me. I'm a huge podcast fan. I have a hard time not having a podcast in my ear. So anytime I get to pontificate and sort of engage with a genre that I love, I get very excited. So thank you for reaching out, and I'm excited to learn more about you and your work as a follow-up to this. Um, I don't know. I was pondering what I thought would be important to say. And I imagine you have a wide range of listenership, a wide range of listeners, an audience,
I call them audience, but yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I get stuck between German and English and weird
It
things come
happens.
out. Uh, but I kept coming back to this quote from uh, Chef's Table, which was that Netflix series where they look at these insane Michelin star restaurants. And there was one where they were interviewing a really, really established famous chef about one of his students who'd gone on to make this amazing restaurant that I think maybe even got like more Michelin stars than this guy had. It got three or something. Anyway, but I remember he said, if my student one day doesn't become better than I am, then maybe I wasn't a good teacher. Maybe I wasn't a very good teacher. And I think that's really our job, speaking more to the teachers out there, but is to pass on what we've learned, what we know, and to give our students to do more than we ourselves could accomplish, and to pass that baton. And I think that kind of fits with what we were saying earlier about the genre having to evolve, or allowing the genre to evolve. Is there's a lot of value, there are a lot of truths in the past, and there are a lot of lessons that have been learned, some the hard way, but um, we can honor the past while looking forward, and it's probably not going to be me who keeps opera alive into the future. It's going to be our students and their students, and so it's fun to be part of that lineage, of that progression of the craft, and I'm so excited to see folks bringing in information from other areas like sports psychology, uh, motor learning theory, all these things coming together that can um, expand our field and build something that is dynamic and that continues to evolve and continues to thrive. And I think that's on both the micro and individual artist level, and then sort of macro the genre. Um, it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time. So thanks for letting me hang out with you and ponder these things and chat.
My pleasure. Anytime. I think that quote that you brought up is so powerful. If my student does not surpass me, I must not have been a very good teacher. And I've had teachers who clearly did not believe that.
Yeah.
But I will say, if any of my teachers are listening to this, it wasn't you. But
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way.
yeah. So awesome. Keith, again, thank you so much. For anyone who's listening, if they want to contact you directly, if they have questions about Pepperdine or about applying, or anything like that, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
The best way is probably my Pepperdine email address. If you go to the Pepperdine website and search Keith Colclough, or just look at the music faculty, you can find me. I also do have a website, keithcolclough.com. Some of the materials on there are pretty outdated. That's one of my projects for the summer, is to hopefully finally update some of those things, make some new recordings as well.
Right after you finish your module on taxes for singers, right?
Yes, exactly. Oh, golly. But
Okay.
yeah, that'd be a great way.
Perfect. I will also have those links in the description for this episode, either below or to the left or wherever these platforms choose to put it. But Keith, thank you so much for spending some time. I had a great time. I hope you had some fun as well. And
Yeah,
all the
just
listeners, make sure you keep your eyes peeled for Keith and for Pepperdine, because it seems like only good things are coming from that part of the world. All right,
thanks,
thank you
man.
so much one final time.
Thank you.
If you liked what you just saw, make sure that you're on the High Note Performance mailing list so you can get first dibs to everything that we put out. Also, all the social media stuff, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and now Spotify and Apple Podcasts. All of that stuff helps more than you know, and it only takes just a second. And just for the few people who have stayed right to the very, very end of this, I am including some secret links in the description down below that gets you access to Hall of Fame singing and Hall of Fame practice. These are the two guides that all of our clients get so that they can take the first couple of steps. I've never given these away for free before, but I've decided to just for a short time. So if you click those links and it doesn't work anymore, I'm sorry, you've missed your chance. So for now, jump in there as fast as you can and get your copy.